What's up, everybody? Steve Baskis here. Got a special guest on the show today, Thomas Zampieri, Dr. Thomas Zampieri. How are you doing, Tom?
All right. Glad to be on the show, Steve.
Well, we wanted to have you on so that you could tell the world a little bit about some of the legislation that's been passed on Capitol Hill the past week, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
But before we go there, how are you doing? Where are you located in the country?
Oh, yes, sir. Steve, I'm down here in Houston, Texas. And of course, the hot spot right now with COVID. But we're all fine. And of course, as national president of the Blind Veterans Association, we're concerned about all our members now in the midst of the pandemic.
So you're the president of the Blinded Veterans Association, which is a congressionally chartered veteran service organization. That's correct, right, Tom?
Correct. And this happens to be, I'm honored to be the president this year. It's our 75th anniversary this year on March 28th, 1945. We were founded. And so it's a special year for me. I was elected last August at the National Convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the 74th. And so I took over as president and then found ourselves in the unusual circumstances where, unfortunately,
Who's that? What's their name?
Yeah, Mac is.
Oh, Miss Mac.
Mac and Angelina's his sidekick.
Well, Tom, I mean, it's great that I know you were chasing to be president for a while, and so it's awesome to. I congratulate you for the position and everybody else too that's moved into their positions, and it's a never ending, ever changing thing with the organization, and I'm proud to be part of the Blinded Veterans Association. Tom's been on the show before, but if you haven't caught that episode, maybe look back on it. He talked about some history of blindness within the veteran community and some of the beginnings. But Tom, so this legislation, what was it exactly? What were the different pieces, and why is it such a big deal?
Well, this was really landmark legislation. I don't use that term loosely. We've always had problems where the previous VA benefits for the Special Adaptive Housing Program had a couple major problems. One was the amount that they provided really wasn't sufficient to meet the new adaptive technology changes that blind individuals want and need in their homes. And so the previous grant was $85,000 roughly. And so what we had tried to do is get that amount increased. But the other big barrier was for the BVA members who are service connected for their blindness. The VA's statutory regulations were that, and this goes back 20 years or more, you had to have no vision, zero, no light perception.
Yeah.
And so while we do have a number of members that are in that category, by and large, a lot of our members still have some remaining vision. Maybe it's only 5 degrees. Maybe it's only, maybe it's 2,200, which is legal blindness.
That's the acuity, right? 2,200.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we struggled in 2008 when I was the director of government relations for BVA. We made a real big attempt to get it changed. And ironically, Congress at that time, there's two grants. There's the Special Adaptive Housing Grant, which is the larger one, and then there's a Special Housing Adaptive Grant, which is a smaller one. It's about 14,000.
I
And
qualified for that one.
yes, well, the interesting thing is that one we got the language changed for the visual acuity for legal blindness to be qualified. But at that point in time back then, there was all kinds of budget concerns, and we were disappointed because they said, well,
There's no budget concerns now, Tom?
yeah, apparently not.
No, it's out. We're just printing money. We're just going to print it.
Actually, nowadays they don't talk about balancing the budget like they used to back then, and so kind of interesting. Now they pass $2 trillion emergency bills without hesitation,
without blinking an eye.
Yeah.
Har.
So what happened was, going back a little bit again, we were a little bit happy that they at least made that first change to the SHA grant. But then the famous kind of story was I was told, well, just wait a couple years, Tom, and then come back to us and we'll try to fix the bigger grant, the SAH, Special Adaptive Housing Grant. Well, that by the time we circled back a couple years later, it was just there was no congressional interest.
Yeah.
For different reasons. Again, part of it was budgetary because they said, well, we have to find the offset to cover the expense of that kind of a change.
So before you go on, Tom, let's, for the listeners like that are not veterans or even disabled veterans, maybe to be more specific, what is this like special adaptive housing grant or the special housing, this adaptive grant? What is it used for? And there were two, the distinction was one was a lot less money that was granted to the veteran. But yeah, what is it exactly?
That's a great question. They're both similar in the sense that the smaller grant could be used for, I guess you'd say, minor modifications, like if you needed extra lighting put in to a house,
or handicap rails in like the bathroom, right?
Exactly. A ramp up the steps if you had a lot of steps.
An intercom system if you're blind and you want to talk to the person on the outside of the house, right? That would be considered, you think?
Right. And then, but $14,000 doesn't go very far.
It's custom work a lot of times on homes, and contractors charge quite a bit of money.
Oh, huge. And then the SAH, which is the larger grant, was originally set up with the idea of major structural alterations. And that grant, the SAH, was historically set up actually for spinal cord injured veterans or patients or veterans with major neurological problems and needed special bathrooms, special doorways for wheelchairs, the whole gamut of the changes. They needed a roll-in shower.
Yeah. Roll under sink, countertop systems.
Exactly. In the kitchen. Oh gosh. And those, well, they would eat through that $80,000 in no time. And I have a lot of friends in the Paralyzed Veterans of America, which is our sister sort of organization. And my friends who are spinal cord injured used to tell me, that doesn't cover nearly the expenses involved for these types of modifications. Again, that could be anything from the structural changes to painting, putting down, tile floors. Yeah. I mean, it could get into all kinds of different things. And then, so what happened was for this bill, HR 3504, the Senate version, which was introduced, was actually Senate 2022. And this bill, the other barriers were it was a one-time use. So
Yeah.
if yeah, as you know, if
The
you
amount
got that,
was a one-time kind of
yep,
payment granted to the disabled veteran for the adaptations.
exactly. So if you got a SAH, the big grant, or if you got just the SHA grant, Special Housing Adaptive Grant, all these, like, we use the same like acronyms in the VA that we did in the military. That was a one-time 14,000 and do not pass go. You don't get any more money. If you're 26 years old and you're a veteran that came back from Iraq, for example, then what do you do the rest of your entire life? If you, all people change, to get married, they move to another place. They've got zero money for adapting a new home.
Yeah.
And especially for our older, like Vietnam War veterans who might have used the grants, when were 30 years old, and now they're 65 years old and they've moved into a smaller house because their families change and kids have left the house and whatever. They were stuck, literally stuck, with the decision of, do I take out loans if I need modifications because of my aging,
Yeah.
and other disabilities. So we really looked at this as the whole structure of our organization is made up of, as World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and Gulf War
Veterans.
II, post 9/11 era. So like I said, we started working with the PVA because they wanted this thing changed, and they wanted
PVA,
the amount.
That's the
Right.
Paralyzed Veterans of
Right.
America or Association.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, Paralyzed Veterans of America. And then Wounded Warrior Project, ironically, got very involved with us. And so it was a partnership of us three. The other veteran service organizations, I will say, all supported our legislative advocacy.
Yes.
So VFW and Disabled American Veterans and American Legion and Purple Heart and all those other great groups that we network and advocate with. So they supported us, but the three were BVA, PVA, Paralyzed Veterans of America, and Wounded Warrior Project.
Yeah.
And last year we started the effort of first getting a House version, HR 3504 introduced.
Uh-huh.
And then later in the fall, we got the Senate version introduced. And so the companion to the House bill. And as everybody knows, when, you got to have both chambers of Congress pass the same bill and before it can go to the president. So anyway, we had three requests. One for blind veterans, that if you're legally blind and you're service connected,
which is 2,200. That's
right.
a key to remember. 2,200 acuity is legally blind.
There you go. And we asked that the amount be increased from 85,000 to, Congress inserted this. It's one of the mysteries of working with them. They put in $98,492.
Exact.
Yeah.
I wonder where that number comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. Your listeners can kind of scratch their heads and say, why did they put $98,492? Why didn't they round it up to 99? Or why did they round it down?
I have a question, Tom. So before this legislation that passed this past week, a totally blind veteran had the ability to receive that large amount that you're talking about, or
right. Right.
Okay.
And the problem though was, here's the third part.
Caveat.
They were they were limited it by law, the VA. They could only give out 30 total grants a year for the SAH.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you stop for a moment and you think, well, there's over, there's hundreds and hundreds of blinded veterans.
Yeah.
So what would happen is invariably people would apply and maybe they were qualified, but because of the statutory limit of 30 a year, the VA would invariably tell veterans, well, we, can't fund you this year.
Yeah.
Apply next year and maybe, we can get you included. So that was a huge problem with when you're talking about, thousands of blinded veterans.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, this was like the trifecta. We got them to increase the amount to $98,492. We got them to increase the number of grant applications every year from 30 to 120 a year.
Wow.
And then we got every 10 years, they could, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, if you were to move because of, different circumstances and changes in your life, you would be eligible for that full amount again in 10 years. So that this was, this was an amazing piece of legislation for the BVA members. They also, by the way, the SHA grant, the small one.
Yes.
Just so you know, they increased. Here we go again, the mystery. They went from like 13,000 to $19,733.
Huh.
And no sense. And so we said, okay, whatever. So if you like $19,733, Congressman, will go along with that. So that also is significant because in between, suppose the 10 years, what if you just needed some minor modifications?
Yeah.
You're eligible for that. And so anyway, we cruised along, and the House bill, we were really excited. July 23rd, 2019, it passed. So we're thinking, oh man, that's like, when you get a bill introduced like in March,
yeah,
and it passes July, 23rd, you think, wow, that's amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
And then the Senate kind of took a while. Our good friends over there they move packages of legislation, but it takes longer. It's just the processes over there. We had broad support from Republicans and Democratic members of the Senate, but they just couldn't. We thought in December, in November of 2019, we were initially told it was probably going to pass. And then it got stalled with a package of, like I said, other veterans legislation and got pushed into February. And then just by coincidence, I testified in February 26th in front of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee for our annual congressional testimony. So I listed this as obviously one of our top priorities. And the senators and congressmen were sitting there at the hearing, and our friends from PVA were there. Our Wounded Warrior Project executive director was actually sitting next to me, and he testified and mentioned this bill S-2022.
Yeah.
So the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee kind of smiled during my testimony and gave me the thumbs up that this bill would pass. Well, they made some amendments to the bill that had nothing to do with the adaptive housing.
Huh.
Again, they tend to lump things into different bills.
Yeah.
So what they did, just so your listeners understand, they complicated things because they added some sections to this bill that have to do with educational benefits and VA home loan fees and some other things. So what happened was, bingo, once they did that and they passed it, it had to go back over to the House because they had, modified the original bill.
Yeah.
It wasn't a huge problem though, because we had bipartisan, large amount of support on the House Veterans Affairs Committee for HR 3504. Chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Chairman Takano, and the ranking member, Dr. Phil Rowe, who I believe you will remember meeting him.
Yeah.
They both worked with the Senate and said, this gets really technical, but there's ways where the committee can waive having to have like a new hearing and new votes. And so as long as the chairman and ranking member of the House committee agreed with the amendments in the Senate, we didn't have to go back through the whole process of hearings and votes again.
Yeah.
So then what happened was in March, we were all excited because the BVA thought, this is going to pass. And then there was a strange pandemic that shut Congress down for...
Shut the world down.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, the whole world. For weeks, all the congressmen went home.
Yeah.
And they weren't, yeah. So that's the big delay all spring. And then they come back in June and everybody's trying to figure out their process for bills. So what happened was our special adaptive housing bill kind of lingered throughout the month of June. And then Don Overton, our executive director, who had been doing government relations for us, decided that working in conjunction with these other veteran service organizations, we did a mailing out where we asked our members to contact their members of Congress to just ask, why hasn't this bill passed? There's no objections to it. Everything's been done.
Let's move it.
So again, we get into the procedures of the House of Representatives. So they said, okay, they got a lot of letters, by the way, emailed into them, and it got their attention. Amazingly, within like 10 days after we did this, Speaker Pelosi's office reached out to Don Overton at the BVA headquarters in Washington, and they said, we are going to put your bill on the suspense calendar for Monday morning, July 20th at 10 a.m. And what that means is, unless Monday morning somebody walked in with a strange reason to object to it, the bill passes. And so there was no final dramatic roll call vote where, you watch, well, if you have nothing else to do, you watch C-SPAN and you see them, lining up to vote and casting their votes, and everybody.
No.
Yeah. And so there was none of that. It was just on the calendar, which was great. And so it passed Monday.
That's awesome.
It was sent over to usually it takes 48 hours or 72 hours, depending, to officially send it to the White House for signature.
Yeah.
So I think by tomorrow
should be signed.
it could be signed.
So,
And then, yeah,
so Tom, I mean, I'm sorry for interrupting. You know, the three significant things then,
yep,
I guess, you know, there was an increase on both adaptive, grants, SHA, SAH, and
hmm
extensions. You know, every 10 years it can be tapped into, and am I correct that this time round it was the 2200 also the acuity
right,
legally blind
right,
it was part
yeah,
of those are probably some of the three big changes that occurred in this particular legislation for these grants.
right, absolutely. And also if you have very restricted visual fields,
Sure.
so if you have tunnel vision and you have less than 20 degrees of peripheral fields, you qualify along, or if either one, if you have that significant tunnel vision, or if you have the visual acuity of 2200 or worse, you
Yeah.
qualify. And
That's
then that, yeah, yeah,
no, that's important to say because a lot of people don't that are not familiar with eye disorders or blindness, visual impairments, they don't they just usually think blind or, sighted or not, I mean, but there's a lot of different kinds of disorders where you have peripheral vision, you don't have peripheral vision, you see light, but you can't see much of anything. It's just bright, or you're completely blind, or everything in between. There's just so double vision. And so there are a lot of different things that are involved, right, with defining, what someone's acuity is
sure,
and I guess
right,
visual range.
absolutely. And then the fourth part of the change was like I said, the going from 30 total a year to
Oh yeah,
120.
that's a big.
It's big. And then
Could be
I
bigger,
might,
but that's better than
I,
nothing.
I'll be, I want to let the listeners know too that we owe a lot to Homes for Our Troops. We've worked with them as far back as I worked with them in 2007 on the original legislation,
Yeah,
for the SHA change. But they really helped us get this started. They testified in September of 2018, which was the end of the session just before the elections of 2018. But they testified about their frustration. They help veterans with, basically new homes.
yeah,
And they specifically, when they testified, mentioned that they struggle to make new homes for, paralyzed veterans. But they, in front of everybody on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, they said blind veterans, are really in the same tough situation. They need a lot of electronic
equipment.
modifications. As you mentioned, being able to just, if somebody comes up the driveway to your front door,
Oh, this
ask.
this 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 show we're doing, Tom, is complementing the last show because I spoke about smart home technology.
There
And,
you go.
and so, yeah, whether it's thermostats or door locks or cameras, motion detectors, things that can just give people, someone who's got a visual disorder, spatial awareness or an
hmm
intercom, just all kinds of things that can interface with with their phone and the screen reader that we use on a daily basis to keep us informed and moving along with everybody else in the world.
Yeah. So the great news here with this bill, it's like everything else. I felt frustrated for a few years. I kept waiting for an opportunity. The opportunity sort of came to us because the Homes for Our Troops testified in September of 2018, and it just lit a fire because when the new Congress came in January of 2019, last year, there were members that remembered that hearing.
Yeah.
And so they reached out to the BVA and Paralyzed Veterans America and said, look, we want to draft language with all these different types of issues that fix them. And so, lo and behold, so we're I appreciate so much the help from our, again, our good friends in the Paralyzed Veterans of America, Wounded Warrior Project, and then Homes for Our Troops and the things that they do. And then
They represent such huge bodies of veterans and disabled individuals. And
sure.
it takes this collective effort on Capitol Hill to make things happen. Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
I have a few questions for you, and then we won't keep you all day long.
Okay.
But these are somewhat related, but not so much related. Do you believe with the atmosphere of things and the circumstances that are going on, that veterans, who are collecting benefits, but even other people, the government supports a lot of different things. In the state of the nature of the government spending more money or printing more money, and where we are, should veterans be worried at all with maybe changes ahead, or
I
what would you what are your thoughts?
my from I backtracking a little bit. My actually the first time I met Congressman was 1986.
Uh huh.
So you may not realize that I don't know
I was
Abraham
1 year old.
Lincoln.
Sorry, Tom.
But so I've been at this a long time, and I've seen the peaks and valleys. I've seen the battles, as I included in this discussion, over balancing the budget and getting lectures in 2006 and 2007 about we don't have enough money. And I've seen it go from one extreme to another, where now, even with all the major challenges because of the pandemic, high unemployment skyrocketing, everybody is struggling, healthcare issues,
Yeah, jobs. Yeah,
everything.
employment, everything.
But all the members of House and Senate that I've known for decades are strongly supportive of actually making sure that the VA gets any additional funding. Last year, when they passed the legislation last March, for example, for the pandemic, the
The
emergency.
CARES Act, is that?
Yeah, there was $10 billion just given to the VA for a variety of different uses regarding, the pandemic. And that was in addition to their yearly appropriations. And so, but you really asked a good question. Where I kind of always lose sleep because I've been through so many of these cycles is it may not, it won't be this year or even next year, but I think there will come a time because of the deficit that has grown so much in trying to deal with this. Some point down the road, somebody's going to have to make, or they will probably attempt anyway, to say, oh, we've got to, go back to being physically responsible, meaning financially, not physical fitness. And so, but I would assure veterans that, this year's VA's appropriations that's actually being voted on this coming week is huge. It's like for benefits and healthcare and the national VA cemetery system and all those other things, VA education, it's like close to 240 something billion. So that's when I first went to work for BVA in April 2005 as the director of government relations. The annual appropriations for all those systems, for education, for healthcare, for benefits, for housing loans for veterans, was not like $89 billion. And I went to a hearing when they were voting on it that summer, and one of the senators said, "This is unsustainable. We can't possibly, we can't, we will never go above. We can't
Oh
allow
my
this to
gosh.
go above $100 billion." And that was in 2005.
Yeah.
And now I see them
Oh my.
this week
Oh my God.
passing this. And I'm saying, he's no longer a senator, but I'm thinking he, 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 he would be in a complete state of shock.
Couple
So
more.
this is great. Being back on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. You have time for just a couple more questions?
Yeah,
Just
a
two
couple
more.
more questions.
So this deals with, because you're legislative director or government relations director. What if someone can't make it to Capitol Hill, can't get be there with the staffers and have meetings and talk with people, how can they make a difference? I mean, is it real important in their local community to do certain things? I mean, what
Oh,
what
it is.
what would be your advice to people?
Oh, wow. What a great way to sort of segue into the end of this. You just touched on the key thing. And I mentioned Don did this legislative alert thing where we asked our members to go to our website and then they could just enter their personal information, their home address, their zip code,
Yeah.
and a letter with all the requests on the specifics would be sort of auto populated and then sent to their congressman and both of their senators. And so, as easy as it is, it sounds like to most people that, well, it won't make a difference. It did. And we included it so that all those emails also, instead of just the two senators and your local congressman, they also all went to Speaker Pelosi's office. And so they literally flooded her office with those. So that's something that you can do. But I think the other thing I always have told veterans is get to know who your congressman is. And oftentimes, even if it's a distance to get to them, what they're doing now is doing a lot of webinars for BVA members. You can, check your congressman's website, and they'll have information about when they're going to. Now, before the pandemic, though, they would do town hall meetings, and I went to some of them in Houston.
Sure.
And just was one of those people in the audience with my white cane, and and you get a chance to hear them speak about what their priorities are policy wise. But then most town hall meetings, they open them up, and whether it's a senator or a congressman, they always allow time for questions and answers.
Sure.
If there's a crowd of 250 people, which is how many were there the night I was there, it is hard. I won't pretend that it isn't to get up and
share because, voice.
Yeah, because 25 people all jump up and want to ask a question.
But you're blind, Tom, and you're a doctor. They're gonna pick you.
Yeah,
I'm just playing.
So Congressman Crenshaw, by the way, it was his town hall meeting. He's the Navy, Afghanistan blinded Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
So he kind of spotted me with my white cane, and so eventually I got asked. But I tell people though that again, depending where those are located, if somebody has to travel 15 miles to get to a town hall meeting, it used to be a challenge, and because they're usually held in the evenings or on a Saturday. And I know for blind veterans that's hard to get transportation. But if nothing else, if you just know who your congressman is, where their office is, if you check their website, whether you personally like them or dislike them, that's the other part of it. when it comes to veterans issues that we are pushing for, I think you need to put aside your own personal partisan opinion about, well, this guy I don't like because he's
Yeah.
a Democrat or a Republican or he's an independent or whatever, fill in the blank. I think you need to sort of say, I'm going to reach out to his office regardless, and I'm going to make them aware that blinded veterans have some issues and ask for their office to support making the changes. And if you develop an attitude, and I've seen it in other associations where people, members will say, oh, I'll never talk to that guy.
Sure.
He's a crook. I don't like him. He votes, blah, blah, blah. I don't.
Well, they're leaders. They're leading.
I don't care if they. I don't care if they vote for supporting, purple turtles in, in Saudi Arabia. If they take care of disabled veterans, then I don't care.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to leverage those offices. You have to work with them. I mean, when the pieces come together, when you have big service organizations like the ones you've mentioned, rallying to draft different things with different congressmen and women and senators, as well as the public or the veterans, the veteran community, sending in this digital message saying, support this, do this. It all is building towards pushing for something that at the end of the day is change, and we've made it happen. And
oh, absolutely. And I also want your listeners to know that you've been one of my favorite VVA advocates. You've gone to the Hill with me.
Oh, it's been great.
I've
learned so much. Sitting down with the staffers, and senators and congressmen and women. Yep. But I mean, having the ability to sit in one of those offices in the waiting areas and see the different people, from Saudi Arabia, from Indonesia, you're in Georgia, an office for some Georgia, senator or something, and some Pakistani, team comes in and they're asking questions. It's just wild. Like, you just wonder how they sort through all the letters, the emails, and the people that come in.
I was in one of my stories again, but to give you an idea, I was in the Senate Russell building year ago, September.
Sure.
And I had finished. It was close to 5:00, and I was making my way out to the sidewalk outside to get a ride, and the ride came up to pick me up, and the taxi driver said, do you know who was standing right behind you that just came out of the Senate Russell building? And I said, no, I limited vision. And they said, well, that was Bill Gates.
Oh, wow.
So I was actually lobbying in the same building and the same day, same afternoon with Bill Gates. And so as you said, you don't ever know when you're in an office or you're waiting in the reception area, who's going to walk in.
No, we're walking down the hallway and an admiral's yelling at you. Tom.
Yes.
The admiral's like, get over here, Zampieri.
Yes.
And and then I get to meet him. And it's a unique place to be. And I thank you, Tom, for your time.
Yeah.
Let me just say a few things and stop this broadcast. So everybody, check out the podcast, baskis360.com. I'm looking for more people to interview. So Phil, you can contact me directly, steve@baskis360.com. But I hope you enjoyed the show today. Dr. Thomas Zampieri and this talk about legislation that was just recently passed for disabled veterans. It's going to help immensely. So thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. This is Steve signing out.